They didn't hear me come in. I had used my key, the one my son had pressed into my palm 6 years ago at the closing, when he said, "This is your home too, Mom. Anytime." I remember thinking how much he looked like his father when he said it, the same square jaw, the same easy smile that made you believe everything was going to be fine. The front door was unlocked anyway. It always was on Sunday afternoons. I had driven 40 minutes from my side of Raleigh with an apple pie still warm in the passenger seat, wrapped in a dish towel that had belonged to my mother. I could smell the cinnamon and brown sugar the whole drive over. I had made that pie 100 times. My late husband used to say I could sell it and retire. I told him I was already retired. He laughed. That was the kind of man he was. I stood in the entryway and heard their voices in the kitchen. My son, his wife, and then the one that stopped me cold, a woman I didn't recognize at first. A friend of my daughter-in-law's, it turned out. Someone visiting from Charlotte. I wasn't eavesdropping. I want to be clear about that. I was simply standing there, holding a pie, waiting for the right moment to announce myself the way you do when a conversation is already going. And then I heard my name. Not the way you hear it when someone is about to call you in, the other way. "Your mother came by twice last week," my daughter-in-law said. Her voice was low, but not low enough. I don't know how to say this without sounding awful, but it's starting to feel like a lot. There was a pause. "A long one. I know," my son said. 2 words. That was all. Not she means well, or she's been lonely since Dad died, or she drove all the way here. Just I know. "It's not that I don't love her," my daughter-in-law continued. "It's just that we have our own life here, and I feel like she doesn't fully see that. We have our own routines, our own way of doing things." "I'll talk to her," my son said. "You keep saying that." Another pause. "She just doesn't seem to understand that she's not really, our priority right now has to be us, our family. You know what I mean?" I don't remember walking back to the car. I remember the cold air on my face, and I remember sitting behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine, the pie still warm in my lap, and thinking about how strange it is the moment a sentence rearranges everything you thought you understood. Our priority has to be us. I was 72 years old. I had been a nurse for 31 years. I had held the hands of people as they left this world. I had raised my son alone for 4 of those years when his father got sick the first time, before we caught it and beat it back. I had worked double shifts at Wake Medical so he could go to the college he wanted. I had driven to this house every Sunday for 3 years because I thought that was what mothers did. They showed up. They brought things. They tried to stay close. I drove home with the pie. I put it on my kitchen counter and stood there looking at it for a while. Then I called my friend Ruth. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does. I told her what I'd heard. She didn't say much right away. Ruth has known me for 26 years. She knows when I need her to talk and when I need her to just stay on the line. Finally, she said, "Oh, Margaret." And something about the way she said it, not with pity, but with a kind of recognition, like she had always known this day might come, made me realize I had probably known too. Somewhere underneath all those Sunday drives and warm pies and conversations, I told myself we're going well. I had probably known. I want to be fair. My daughter-in-law is not a cruel woman. I believe that. She is organized and particular, and sometimes she holds her feelings too close to the surface. But she loves my son, and she is a good mother to my granddaughter Lily. I have watched her read to Lily every single night when I've stayed over. I have watched her cut the crusts off sandwiches even when she was exhausted. She is not the villain of this story. But there are ways of being unkind that don't announce themselves as unkindness. There are ways of making a person feel small that never leave a visible mark, like not calling back, not once, but enough times that you notice. Like planning Thanksgiving at her parents' house for the 2nd year running without mentioning it to me until I asked. Like the way my son had started saying, "We're pretty busy this week." The same way people say, We'll have to get together sometime. Meaning never. Meaning not really. Meaning please don't hold me to this. I had tried. I want that on record, because I've turned it over so many times in the years since. And I know there are people who would say, why didn't you just talk to him? Why didn't you sit down and say, I feel like I'm losing you? I did. Not in those exact words, maybe. Not with enough of the rawness showing. But I did. About 8 months before that Sunday, I had asked my son to have lunch with me, just the two of us. We went to that barbecue place on Glenwood that he's loved since he was 19. I waited until we had our food, and then I said, as carefully as I could, that I felt like something had shifted between us, that I missed him, that I wasn't sure what I'd done. He looked uncomfortable. He picked up his fork and put it down again. Mom, everything's fine. We've just been really busy. I know you're busy. I'm not asking for a lot. We'll plan something. I'll have Sarah check the calendar and we'll find a Sunday. He did not look me in the eye when he said it. We never found a Sunday. Not that one, not the next 4 months. And then I started driving over unannounced, because I was afraid that if I waited for an invitation, I would wait forever. I see now that this was its own kind of mistake. But I want you to understand the math of loneliness, how it makes you do things that look needy from the outside and feel like survival from the inside. My husband, Robert, died 2 years before that conversation, pancreatic cancer. He was here and then, in the space of 11 weeks, he was not. I had thought I had genuinely believed that loss would pull my son and me closer, that we would grieve together, that Robert's absence would make my presence feel more necessary. I was wrong about that too. After I hung up with Ruth, I sat in my living room for a long time. It was getting dark and I hadn't turned on any lights. I could see the shapes of things in the dimness, the chair Robert used to read in, the side table with the lamp he picked out, the framed photo of the 3 of us at my son's college graduation, all of us squinting into the sun. I tried to remember the last time my son had called me first, not returned a call. Called first, unprompted, just to talk. I could not remember. I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you because I think a lot of women my age know exactly what I mean. And they have never said it out loud to anyone, and there is something about being heard, really heard, that matters. I went to bed that night, with the pie still on the counter. The next morning, I woke up early, the way I always do, and I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee, and I thought about what kind of woman I wanted to be for the rest of my life. I was 72, reasonably healthy, still sharp. I had a house with paid-off equity and a pension that covered my needs, and a retirement account that Robert and I had built together over 30 years of careful living. I had a good life, by any honest measure, and I had spent 3 years trying to shrink myself down small enough to fit into whatever space my son was willing to offer. I thought about my mother. She had lived to 89, and she used to say that the most dangerous thing a woman could do was organize her whole life around people who weren't organizing their lives around her. I got out a legal pad. I'm moralist. It took me 3 weeks to make the first call. The realtor's name was Diane, and she had sold me the house 20 years ago, and she sat at my kitchen table and looked at me the way people look at you when they're trying to figure out if you've thought this through. Margaret, this is a significant decision, she said. I know what it is, I said. I've been in this house for 20 years. I know every creak and every floorboard, and I know what it's worth, and I know why I'm doing this. She nodded once, like a woman who recognizes a closed door. We listed it in April. I did not tell my son. I know how that sounds. But here is what I had learned, and this is perhaps the most important thing I have learned in 72 years of living. You cannot make someone value you by explaining to them that they should. It does not work that way. The announcement, the conversation, the tearful phone call where you lay out the evidence of your own pain, none of it changes anything if the other person has already decided, in some quiet corner of themselves, that you are not worth the trouble. I had already had that conversation, twice, And twice my son had smiled, in a way that meant, I'll wait until she's done and then we'll go back to normal. So I said nothing. The house went under contract in 11 days. During that time, life continued. I still attended my walking group on Tuesday mornings. I still had dinner with Ruth on Thursdays. I still answered my son's texts, the ones that came maybe once a week, usually asking if I was okay or telling me something Lily had done that was funny. I treasured those texts. I am not going to pretend otherwise, even in the middle of all of it. Even knowing what I knew, I still lit up when his name appeared on my phone. That is what it is to be a mother. The love does not downsize itself to match the return, but I had made a decision, and I was going to keep it. I had spent the weeks after that Sunday doing something I had never done before, talking to a therapist. Ruth had suggested it, and I had resisted it, the way women of my generation tend to resist things that feel like admissions of weakness. But the therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Patel, who had a small lavender plant on her windowsill, helped me see something important. "What are you afraid will happen?" she asked me one afternoon. "If you stop being so available?" I thought about it for a long time. "I'm afraid he'll drift away completely," I finally said. "And if he did, if that happened, would it be because you stopped being available? Or would it be because something else was already true?" I looked at the lavender plant. I didn't answer. But I knew the answer. Closing was on a Thursday in June. I signed the papers and walked out of Diane's office and sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for about 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, exactly. More because something that had been held tight for a very long time had finally come loose. 20 years of meals in that kitchen. Robert's rose bushes that I had kept alive by sheer stubbornness after he was gone. Lily's first steps on that living room floor. You can grieve something and still know it was the right thing to let go. I had already found my apartment. It was in a 55-plus community in Cary. Not a retirement home, not assisted living, just a quiet, well-kept place where the people who lived there had all, in one way or another, decided to start something new. My apartment had a small balcony and enough light in the mornings to grow herbs on the railing. I had already ordered lavender and rosemary and a small pot of basil. I had already arranged for Robert's chair to come with me, and the lamp, and the photograph. I moved in on a Saturday. Ruth helped me. We ordered pizza, and we sat on the floor of my half-unpacked living room, and she raised her glass of iced tea and said, "Here's to whatever comes next." I liked that. Whatever comes next. Not the shape I expected it to take, not the shape I had been holding on to. Whatever comes next. My son found out 6 days later. He called me on a Friday afternoon, and I could tell from the first syllable that something was different. The usual easy rhythm was gone. "Mom, I drove by the house." "Okay," I said. "There's a moving truck, and a family I've never seen." "Yes," I said. "I sold the house. I'm in Cary now. I have a lovely apartment." The silence that followed was long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "You sold it." "I did." "Without Mom? Without even telling me?" I had rehearsed this moment, not to be cruel, not to perform something for him, but because I had learned, in 72 years, that the things you don't think through ahead of time are the things you say badly. "I've been trying to tell you things for 3 years," I said. "Not about the house, specifically, but things, important things, and I haven't always known how to get through." "What are you talking about?" "We talk. We exchange information," I said. "That's not the same thing." Another silence. Shorter this time. Mom, I don't understand why you would do this without talking to me." "I want to ask you something," I said, "and I'd like you to really think about the answer before you give it to me. When did you last call me first? Not to return my call. First." He didn't say anything. "When did you last ask me how I was doing, and then actually wait to find out?" Still nothing. "I'm not angry," I said, "and I meant it. I want you to understand that. I'm not calling you a bad person. But I spent a long time trying to hold on to something that was getting harder and harder to hold, and I decided I needed to put my hands to better use. He came to see me the following weekend. He came alone, no daughter-in-law, which I appreciated. He sat in my new living room and looked around at the packed-in familiar things. Robert's chair, the lamp, the photo arranged in a space that was smaller and somehow more mine than the house had ever felt in those last few years. He looked tired and younger than his age somehow, like the conversation had peeled something back. "I didn't know you were unhappy," he said. "I tried to tell you," I said gently. "I know. He stopped, started again. "I think I heard you saying you were lonely, and I told myself you'd be okay, because it was easier." "It was easier," I agreed. "That's not—" He put his hands on his knees. "That's not good enough. I know that." "No," I said. "It isn't." We sat with that for a moment. "What do you need from me?" he asked. I had thought about that question too. For weeks, actually. And I had arrived at an answer that surprised me a little, with its simplicity. "I need you to call me," I said. "Not because something happened. Not because you need something. Just because I'm your mother, and I'm still here, and that should be reason enough." He nodded. His eyes were bright. I could see he was holding something back. "And I need you to know," I continued, "that I'm not going to organize my life around waiting for that call anymore. I have things to do. I have a life that I like. But when you call, I'll be here, and when I matter to you, I'll know it." He stayed for 2 hours. We talked in a way we hadn't talked since before Robert died, really talked. About his father, about those 4 years when things were hard, about the Sunday mornings when my son was small and we used to make pancakes and listen to the radio. He told me he missed his father every single day. I told him I did too. Before he left, he stood in the doorway for a moment, the way he used to as a little boy when he wasn't quite ready to go to bed. "The apple pie you used to bring," he said. Do you think you'd ever make that again?" I smiled at him. My son, who was 38 years old and still, in some essential way, the boy who used to fall asleep with his cheek against my shoulder on long car trips. "If you come and have it here," I said, "on my terms, at my table." He came the following Saturday. He brought Lily. She ran in the front door and made immediately for the balcony to look at the herbs, and I stood back and watched her, this small, bright creature, 7 years old and utterly fearless, put her nose into the lavender and breathe in. "Grandma, it smells like candy," she said. "It does a little," I said. We had pie at the small round table by the window, the 3 of us, and afternoon light came through the glass and lay across the plates. And Lily asked if she could have a second piece, and my son looked at me and smiled a real smile, not the easy automatic one, and something that had been contracted in me for a very long time opened up again. Just a little. Not everything. I'm not going to tell you that one afternoon fixed 3 years. It didn't. We are still learning how to be what we are to each other. My son calls more now, not every week, but more. Sometimes the calls are short, and sometimes they go an hour. My daughter-in-law and I have reached a kind of careful peace that I think, with time, might become something warmer. She sent me a birthday card in August. She had Lily draw a picture on the inside, a woman with white hair standing next to something that was either a plant or a tree. It was hard to tell, and underneath it in Lily's uncertain letters, "Grandma and her garden." I put it on the refrigerator. There are things I know now that I wish I'd known earlier. I know that loving someone does not mean making yourself available to be diminished by them. I know that showing up is only worth something if the other person is genuinely glad you're there. I know that you can raise a child with everything you have and still end up having to introduce yourself to who they became, and that this is not a failure. It's just the nature of the distance between people. And I know in my bones that the most radical thing I ever did was stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing myself, not out of anger, not out of spite, out of a quiet, clear-eyed understanding that I had one life, and it was already more than half over, and I was not going to spend the rest of it in somebody's waiting room. I wake up early still. I make my coffee, and I take it out to the balcony, and I look at the herbs in their pots, the lavender, the rosemary, the basil that keeps trying to bolt in the heat, and I think about my mother. About her saying that the most dangerous thing a woman can do is build her life around people who aren't building their lives around her. She was right. She usually was. This morning, Lily called me. She is 7, and she called me on her father's phone, and she said, "Grandma, can we come this weekend? I want to smell the plants again." "Yes," I said. "Come Saturday. I'll make the pie." After I hung up, I stood on the balcony for a while, with my coffee going cold in my hands, and I felt something I haven't had a word for until recently. Not happy exactly, deeper than that. The feeling of a life that is genuinely, at last, your own. I am not invisible. I never was. I was just standing in rooms where no one thought to look up. Now, I live in a room that I chose, with light I love, tending things that grow, and the people who come to my table come because they want to be there. That is enough. That is, in fact, everything.